What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with One World Under Doom and the Return of Gods. And this is so fun. Like, I always loved Gods in Marvel. It was such a phenomenal story. We did cover it, and we'll provide some context here, but the way this all begins is it's basically Wynn appearing to Mia DiMaria. Now, if you don't know who these folks are, I will explain here in a second, but we also get a little bit of context within this kind of opening conversation between the two of them. Now, for those of you guys who are unfamiliar, it is important to know Wynn is a magic wielder and kind of exists within the same sphere as like Wanda and Doctor Strange and all those magical beings out there. But he almost kind of has the personality of Tony Stark, right? Which is to say that he jokes a lot, he doesn't necessarily take things seriously, he's sarcastic, but when it comes down to it, you also kind of want him in your corner. And so that's why when he's talking to Mia, he says, "I am the avatar of the powers that be, the great and endless god of magic. And you know what's more powerful than them?" And of course, she responds, she says, "I'm sure you'll tell me." And he says, "Well, your precious natural order of things science god might give her a run for her money, but Earth locks definitely won't." And that's where Mia's just kind of like, Earth locks, like, you talk like you're above us, but like you're just some guy, Wynn. And that's where he kind of gets that sarcastic Tony Stark approach, right? "Apprentice, you wound me." And again, that's where the conversation kind of goes back and forth. He says, "This guy, for your information, was specially selected by the powers that be over 1,000 years ago and given immortality in exchange for being her avatar. Meanwhile, we scientists serving as your chained apprentice do not get immortality, but still have to follow you around so Science God can keep an eye on Magic God as part of some ancient compact that prevents war or reality collapsing or whatever." Now, here's what they're talking about here, right? To provide a little bit of context here, here's what's going on. When Jonathan Hickman wrote Gods, he introduced two new groups, or cosmic entities, however you want to refer to it: the powers that be and the natural order of things. Now, Gods was also a story that basically provided a concrete role for the cosmic entity Oblivion in Marvel Comics, which Marvel promptly did away with. But to the powers that be and the natural order of things, you're basically talking about cosmic entities or beings that are the gods of magic and science. And that's basically it. As you can imagine, the powers that be represent magic, and the natural order of things represent science. Now, the powers that be is actually one being, right? One individual, whereas the natural order of things is actually a group. And where Wynn represents the powers that be, the Centaurs represent the natural order of things. Now, what's particularly interesting about these two groups is that Jonathan Hickman never actually went in depth into their histories. All he really established is that at some point in time, they had gone to war with one another, but in order to prevent that war from laying waste to the entirety of reality, and likely due to the intervention of the Living Tribunal and Oblivion, that the two groups formed a pact. They formed a truce that they would only ever operate through avatars that would meet. And so Wynn meets with the Centaurs, and the Centaurs can meet with Wynn, but the actual entities never meet with each other. Now, the way in which Mia ties into all of this is that when she was originally introduced in the Gods story, she was an individual that had incredible magical potential, but the ex-wife of Wynn, a woman by the name of Eiko, who was a Centaur, had actually met with Mia. And because Mia had associated with the Centaurs, the powers that be didn't want to have anything to do with Mia, right? So it would be like if Luke Skywalker had met the Sith before he met the Jedi, and because he had just met with the Sith, the Jedi were like, "We're not going to train you," or at least Yoda was like, "I'm not going to train you on how to be a Jedi because you got coffee with the Sith once, and that's not cool with me, bro." That's basically the level of pettiness that you're talking about here. And they also kind of stunted her growth. Now, there is a little more to it than that, but that'll actually become important later, so we'll hold that explanation until then. For right now, what Wynn is doing is essentially telling her there is a massive danger that's going on out there, because what's basically happening is that there are these kind of sigils out there in the sun, and these sigils prevent demons from arriving on Earth, right? Literally invading the universe. Those sigils have to be maintained at all costs. And so he brings Mia along on this journey. Now, what's kind of interesting about this is we actually sort of learn about the relationship between the two of them, which is to say that Wynn doesn't really teach Mia anything about magic. She's just kind of there along for the ride. And he calls her his apprentice, but unlike what you would traditionally expect between a teacher and an apprentice, again, he doesn't teach her anything. And so what this does is it creates a kind of tense environment between the two of them. More so than that, what Wynn reveals is that he's actually brought Mia to meet with Dr. Doom. because Dr. Doom, as the current Sorcerer Supreme, is one of the only people, really the only person, that can actually help them restore these sigils. Now, what's pretty interesting about this is that Dr. Doom had never actually met Wynn up to this point in time. There just really hadn't been a reason for them to meet, but Dr. Doom is aware of who he is. That's why he says, "Sir Redwyn, avatar of the powers that be, to what do I owe this pleasure of you trampling through my magical defenses like they're not even there? Speak quickly, for I have many scientific countermeasures far beyond your kin, which I am barely holding back." So probably laser guns. Right, laser turrets. But it's kind of interesting because Wynn's response here is, well, I'm Wynn, as you seem to already know, which is nice and it's pretty flattering. And this is the proxy in service to the natural order of things, my chained apprentice. And that's where Mia greets Doom. Doom takes one look at her and is like, "You're lying to me, Wynn. Right, you're lying to me about what's going on. Do you think I, as the Sorcerer Supreme, would not detect how magically attuned this scroll is? This is no mere proxy to a petty god. This is a young and as yet untrained sorcerer. This is raw, unformed clay." And that's where you get an explanation of what was kind of going on behind the scenes, where Wynn says, yes, she is incredibly powerful, right? The sorcerer part. And he says, long story short, she has magical potential, but when she was recruited to the science side, that meant her magical growth would forever be stunted because the gods are petty like that. But my ex-wife who recruited her got her unrecruited at great personal expense, and now she's my apprentice. Now, what he's talking about here specifically was in G.O.D.S issue number 6, that what had happened is that Aiko had actually felt terrible about the idea that with Mia having all this magical potential, she could never really use it to its fullest extent because she had associated with Aiko and the Centaurs. And so what ended up happening is that Aiko, or Aiko, whatever name you want to use, had actually taken Mia to meet with Oblivion and the Living Tribunal. The idea being that one of them could actually override the influence and control of the natural order of things and the powers that be, and basically remove her from being under the control of the natural order of things. Now, there was a kind of series of tests and different things like that that had to be undertaken. The long and short of this is that Mia basically became a kind of servant of Oblivion, meaning anytime Oblivion calls for her, Mia has to answer. But until such a time, she's able to kind of live her life and do her own thing and serve as an apprentice to Wynn, which is why you see her operating as a servant of Wynn in the here and now. More so than that, the price that Wynn is talking about, that Aiko had to pay, is she actually lost both of her eyes. Now, a lot of that was due to foresight, and it was part of the tests and the challenges from the line of wolves and things like that. But what matters is this. As it stands right now, while she is not technically tied to the natural order of things, she's still not able to use her magic to its fullest potential. That's a very, very important thing, because what we're going to see here is a kind of repeat of Secret Wars 1984 with regards to Dr. Doom and the Molecule Man, and Dr. Doom helping Owen Reese actually overcome the various mental blocks that he had in place. But in the here and now, kind of focusing on this moment, Doom asks the question, why are you here? And what do you want? And that's where Wynn says, the boss doesn't care who runs the world, right? Of course, when referring to the powers that be. But there are certain duties that the Sorcerer Supreme must perform that she does care about. And Dr. Doom's initial thought here is that Wynn is referring to the whole idea of Sidorak, right? The demon that was trying to destroy Earth. And what Dr. Doom thinks that Wynn is initially referring to is basically what took place in the Spider-Man comics, right? The idea that before Doom became Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange had been occasionally fighting the children of Sidorak in a kind of gauntlet, and that if any of the children won, it would allow for Sidorak, this demon entity, to invade Earth. But that's not what Wynn is talking about, right? He says, not that one. He says, Emperor, there are magical symbols, sigils sustained within the sun's core. They are there to keep certain demons who famously love hellfire and heat away from it. Without them, said demons would devour the sun from the inside out in an orgy of consumption, thereby killing all life in the solar system. These sigils, Doom, are failing. In fact, they've already decayed so much that they cannot be repaired here from Earth. To be fixed, these sigils must be re-enchanted from inside the sun's core. And I hate to break it to you, Emperor, but this one has to be done personally. Now, what's really interesting about this is it actually kind of shows the shortcomings of both Dr. Doom as the Sorcerer Supreme and even the magical side of Marvel as a whole. Because That's what Mia brings up. She's like, wait a minute, so you guys are telling me that all life in the solar system depends on a handful of magical spells and nobody bothered to maintain them, right? And then she looks at Wynn and she's like, and you're the avatar of the powers that be. You didn't think this needed your attention before it became a crisis? How can you and all the other magic users be so irresponsible as to let something so necessary for all of us depend on a single person? And that has long since been one of the biggest issues of the Sorcerer Supreme within Marvel Comics. So much responsibility for the survival of the Earth and even the universe itself rests on the shoulders of the Sorcerer Supreme. Now, that's the way in which Doctor Strange stories get told, right? Otherwise, he would just be a dude over there who just appears in crossovers every once in a while. But within the universe itself, it is kind of irresponsible when you think about it, right? Like all these spells and all these magical incantations, and at any moment, the Earth and the universe can be obliterated due to any number of factors, and only one dude in existence is capable of keeping these things in check, or at the very least, is the one responsible for doing it. You would think that these levels of responsibility would be handed out to all kinds of different people, but again, that's the nature of the Sorcerer Supreme, to protect the universe from various magical enemies that would seek to destroy it. It is a role that is necessary and is even recognized as being necessary by the Living Tribunal. But again, despite all of these concerns, Dr. Doom just says, worry not, Mia. While you are correct and your outrage against Wynn and his ilk is justified, it can still be repaired. If Doom were to combine his magic with Redwind's and with yours, Mia, then we could voyage there to the sun's core amid the inconceivable heat and pressure and make what repairs are necessary inside a temporal bubble of normal space. And so he's just like, Doom requires a moment of preparation. And then like 2 seconds later, he's like, and now Doom is ready. Which I absolutely love, that literally it is a moment of preparation. And then at that point, they're teleported to the sun. Literally, the inside of the sun. And it's kind of nuts because you do get the sigil, but from Mia's perspective, she's never experienced anything like this before, right? No one has. I mean, no human being has ever just sat next to the sun, but it's still a pretty cool concept, right? It's a phenomenal thing because at that point, their attention is drawn to the sigils. And this is where you actually start to see the allegiance of Mia shift. And you kind of get to see one of the cooler elements of Doctor Doom, but specifically a kind of callback to Secret Wars 1984. Because what ends up happening is that Doctor Doom says, unfortunately, the powers of the sigil is restored only once all of them are repaired. So we have to be quick about this because these demons will take every opportunity to invade. And so that's where he brings Mia along, right? He just tells Wynn, keep an eye out. And when he brings Mia, he kind of starts teaching her, right? Because Mia says, Wynn never teaches me these things. He expects me to figure it out on my own. But Doom says, Doom is not Redwin, and you are a quick study. But I notice your magic is stunted. And that's where she's like, well, I mean, Wynn told you, right? My wings got clipped when I was recruited by the natural order of things. And that's where Doom says, that's not what I'm referring to. Magic is powered by the unshakable belief that one's spells will work. It is one of the reasons why Doom is Sorcerer Supreme. The other reason is because Doom is so awesome. And he says, but you, Mia, you do not have appropriate faith in your own spell casting. Why? And she's like, well, I mean, Wynn says, he's like, I don't care what Wynn says. Cast now as strong as you possibly can. And she does, and it works. Now, the reason why I say this is a callback to Secret Wars 1984 is because those of you guys who are familiar with the Molecule Man, you know that Owen Reese, as we know him now, is astronomically powerful, right? Powerful on a multiversal level. So much so that when Galactus went to visit him in Ultimates, even Galactus was terrified and was like, Molecule Man could end Galactus with a single thought. But when it came to the original Molecule Man appearance, he wasn't really that powerful. In Secret Wars 1984, you learned it was because he didn't have any confidence in himself. He didn't really have any confidence in his powers. And so Dr. Doom was able to start knocking down those mental blocks and helping Owen Reese build up his own confidence. So because of Dr. Doom, Owen Reese became godly powerful. And that's kind of what you're seeing here. Dr. Doom having this conversation with Mia and saying, you are far more capable than you have been led to believe. He doesn't necessarily address the idea of the natural natural order of things and what influence they may have had on Mia's ability to use her powers in relation to the powers that be. But what seems to be going on here is that because she's no longer tied to the natural order of things, but she's not necessarily a direct servant of the powers that be, she's just kind of out there. So there aren't really any limitations on her powers. This is effectively Marvel telling us that she is immensely capable and will become an incredibly powerful magic wielder if we ever get any meaningful future from the G.O.D.S comics. Now, in the midst of all of this, right, while Doctor Doom congratulates her, Mia talks about this idea that while Doctor Doom is really considered to be this narcissistic and villainous being that exists out there, in actually being in his presence and with him actually conversing with her and talking to her, he is kinder than she expected, but he's actually a phenomenal instructor. He's a great teacher, and that's one of the great things about Doctor Doom, right? It's the kind of side of his character that you don't always see. 9 times out of 10, Doctor Doom's just pissed off for whatever reason, and he's just showing up and doing things in a pissed off state. But sometimes you get these moments where you actually have someone interacting with Doom where you see him, I wouldn't say in a vulnerable state, but in just kind of like a steady state, to a degree. And that's what she's getting here. And she's almost in awe of it, right? She's almost just kind of like, wow, right? Like, he's cool, man. Like, I mean, he speaks with confidence, right? There isn't really any ounce of fear or doubt in his voice. He's authoritative and commanding. He's everything that a person of power should be. Now, of course, in the midst of all of this, suddenly the demons start launching their attack, right? And it's pretty quick here. I mean, it's not an overly huge thing. And so Doctor Doom goes to tend to the rest of the sigils while Mia, working alongside Wynn, starts casting these spells in order to defeat these demons. And that's when you start to see that Mia is a lot more powerful than she had initially been led to believe. Even in the G.O.D.S comic, where she's able to start banishing demons back to their dimension. The issue with this is that the demons had basically cast a spell of their own, this actually breaking down the protective sphere that Doctor Doom had cast. That's why Wynn says their incantation, it neutralized our magic. The sigils are immune, but the bubble's collapsing, and literally it just implodes. But they're all still alive. And the reason why is because Doom says Doom may be Sorcerer Supreme, but unlike you, Redwyn, he does not rely solely upon magic. It's too capricious. This device that I created before we left, it is activated, adjusting our strong and weak nuclear forces, basically making us intangible. And thus, we are untouched by the maelstrom around us. And that's where Wynn is like, terrific, right? That's fantastic, Doom, right? Great work. I'm so glad that you use science to keep us alive for what, 20 minutes? 15? How long are the batteries on that gizmo going to last? And incidentally, can it even send us back to Earth? Or are we just left delaying the inevitable? And so Doom is just like, it cannot send us back. No, it alters nuclear force, which requires a remarkable amount of energy. So we have 3 minutes, Redwyn. And that's where Redwyn's like, oh, 3 minutes. Oh my God, well, I'm glad I've got so much time to ponder my life before we all die. And he's like, the next time that you want to build yourself a plan B, try to maybe think ahead just a little bit more. Now, you guys know Dr. Doom will tolerate a lot of things. One of the things he will not tolerate is sass. Doom doesn't take lip off of anybody, and that's where he immediately attacks. He attacks Wynn, right? Like enough to be able to just beat the crap out of this guy, at least only for a moment. And Doom gives him the business, right? He says, you damned immortals, you float above everyone else for so long, you become accustomed to the concerns of the world not touching you. You surrender any responsibility that you have to care. And that's where Doom tells Mia, witness Mia, this is the value of death. Yes, it puts terrible limits on our potential. Yes, it robs us of those we love, but in return, it gives us the gift of ensuring that men like Redwyn can trouble us only fleetingly. And even if he cannot die, he can most certainly suffer. And that's where Wynn's like, oh, you love death that much? Well, that's awesome. We got a regular Thanos over here. Well, good news, Doom. You're gonna get to experience it real soon. How much time do we have left? And Doom is like, you have 67 seconds, Redwyn. We, however, have all the time in the world. And he teleports himself and Mia back to Earth. Like, what a dick! What a dick move. Trick Wynn into thinking that there's no escape, that they're stuck there. I guess technically he didn't say they couldn't escape. Wynn just assumed they couldn't teleport out. But that's where things get kind of cool, because at that point, Mia addresses Doom, right? And he's like, you're wondering how Doom accomplished it. No doubt, right? Doom is capable of fantastic things. And you're likely wondering how Doom was able to achieve this fantastic thing. And he says, Doom created two devices, one on my person to render us temporarily intangible, and the other left here, which used my castle's technology to teleport us back after a suitable delay. The second device was as necessary as the first. Doom would never build technology that allowed him only to suffer before certain death. And that's where Mia's like, I mean, that's cool, but that's not really what I was gonna ask, right? Like, when? I can't let him die. Like, I mean, the guy's crass, the guy's a dick, he's very sarcastic. I mean, there's no reason why I should have anything to do with that guy. But at the end of the day, he is immortal. And I know in my bones that I don't want to be the kind of person who leaves someone to burn for eternity inside the sun. And that's where Doom says, then ask me, Mia. You have earned a favor today. I can save him and may even choose to do so if you ask me to. Now, initially she ponders it, but one of the things to keep in mind is that Mia has seen firsthand what happens when people start making deals with gods and beings in the magical sphere. When it came to Oblivion, for example, right, it was unexpected for Oblivion to say, yes, I can free you from the servitude of the natural order of things, but you will now be my servant. You will now be my avatar, my harbinger, and you will come whenever I call to you. Right? It was a totally unexpected thing. But what was she going to do in the face of Oblivion? Say no? And that's kind of what she's looking at here when it comes to Dr. Doom, that if she makes a deal with him, she will owe him a favor. And that's what she says. I do not want to be the kind of person who owes Doom a favor. And so ultimately, she leaves. And then after a few weeks, Wynn pops back up, right? Literally teleported out of the sun where he had just been burning and just sitting there, probably suffering some unimaginable pain. And what she reveals that over the course of these last few weeks, she'd actually been researching teleportation spells, basically teaching herself, magical abilities. And that what this meant was that it would give her the ability to bring Wynn back. So again, teaching herself magic now that she's got more confidence than she had before. But what's particularly telling about this conversation is she effectively tells Wynn, I'm tired of being referred to as your servant, as your chained apprentice, right? I have a name. You will address me as Mia. That's who I am. I'm more than just some person that follows you around. And you are going to start teaching me magic, right? Either that or I can just walk away. I can leave right now and go and do my own thing. And so it's kind of cool to see that the crisis of confidence she had wasn't necessarily just about her powers, but was also about her role in the midst of all of this. Because it is important to keep in mind, Mia was just suddenly thrust into a situation that she had no explanation for, right? She was literally just a person who was sitting out in the world and then suddenly thrown into the world of cosmic entities and magical beings and the in-betweener mentally reconditioning people in Cubix cores, like all kinds of crazy things, right? Just something that she had no explanation for and no ability to conceive. And when the dust settled and it all came to an end, she was suddenly now an apprentice to Wynn. So much had happened so fast that she was trying to find her footing and her confidence got lost in the shuffle. But now it's back. And so that's why she tells Wynn, you and I are going to be partners. I am not going to be your servant anymore. The issue with this is that with her operating at Columbia University, she is a student of science. And so with her being a student of science, it runs in direct contradiction to the powers that be. So by her being a partner with Wynn, it now means that Wynn is in league with someone who studies science instead of someone who is 100% and strictly loyal to magic. It's fraternizing with the enemy. That's how it's going to be perceived. And that's why he says, look, I mean, the powers that be aren't really going to like this. And the response of Mia, they're not going to care because the powers that be don't really pay that much attention to what goes on around here, which is kind of how it works with cosmic entities, right? Oblivion's not watching everything everybody on Earth does all the time, right? He just kind of responds whenever there's some kind of universal calamity or something along those lines. And so that's why she's like, no one's going to care. No one's really going to notice. So yeah, we're partners and we're going to work together. And so again, at the end of all of this, this is a teaser story. It's Marvel reintroducing gods in an effort to see whether or not we as the audience care enough to see any more of it. Now, your mileage may vary on how you feel, but again, it is a cool kind of tie-in to this whole one world under doom scenario. So with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.